This week, illness tried to steal my creativity, and while I wasn't sure if I could even muster up the energy to create a tutorial for this week, I found inspiration in the delicate beauty of these simple watercolor cherry blossoms that are easy, elegant, and achievable even on the toughest days. So as part of me keeping things quick and simple today, I'm just using this smaller maiden block pad of 100% cotton watercolor paper so I don't have to worry about taping anything down. I'm also going to be painting totally freehanded today, so no drawing or outlines are even necessary. We can just jump right into painting. Then, of course, we have watercolor paints, and the good news is that we are going to be using a very limited palette of colors today. I have some clean water and a paper towel, and then we only need 1 or 2 brushes today. I will be using a number 6 round from my Craftamo set, as well as the number 1 rigger. But honestly, you could probably just use the 6 round today for this entire painting if you wanted or needed to. And as a side note, any of the supplies you see me using today, including my Craftamo brush sets, which are just about sold out, will be listed with links and information in the description of this video if you're interested in learning more. So let's just jump right into it here, and I apologize in advance for my scruffy voice today since I'm sick. I will try not to talk too much today. Now, as I said, we'll be using a very limited palette of colors, which is awesome. Here I have some alizarin crimson. I'll have some that is lighter in value and more watered down. And then I'll have some here that is darker in value and more concentrated in the pigment. Then creating these flowers is actually very simple. There's really nothing complex about what we're doing today. If you practice brush strokes very often, you're going to catch on to this super quick. Basically, I'll just take the lighter, more watered down alizarin crimson first and paint in some simple petal shapes using just 2 or maybe 3 strokes of the brush by pressing down and pulling out slightly on the bristles, leaving the stroke with a point in the center and a rounded off end. To paint an open cherry blossom, we'll just paint 5 of these petals in a full circle, and if it helps, you can turn your paper to get at these at a better angle. Then after the petals are painted and while they are still wet, and that is the key point to making this technique for these watercolor cherry blossoms to work today, they need to still be wet. We'll take a touch of that darker, more concentrated alizarin crimson and place a touch of that dark pink right at the center of the flower petals and then let it spread out into the petal a little bit. And really, I'm not going to mess with this too much. I'm just going to let the water and the paint do the work for me and let it do its thing. This is one of the beauties of watercolor painting, I think. And in the end, you really don't know what you're going to end up with, but it usually has good results. The other fun thing is that even though we might be trying out the same technique, all of our paintings are going to look different and be special and unique. I'm just going ahead and painting in another open flower here, very close or even overlapping the first one a little bit. And then later you can change things up by adding some interest into the piece and painting in some blossoms that look more like they're side facing. And all you have to do that is paint 2 or 3 of the petals closely together. I think the biggest trick with this painting today is creating the overall composition for the piece. Since we don't have an outline drawing today, you're going to want to sort of visualize how you'd like this all to tie together. I'm planning to paint these blossoms like they're on a branch that's sort of angled from the top right corner down to the bottom left corner. I'll paint in the larger flowers in the center of the page and then add in smaller flowers or even buds, moving to the outer corners of that branch that will be placed in later. But with all that being said, if you feel more comfortable using a pencil and lightly sketching in that background branch that the blossoms are going to be painted around, by all means, please feel free to do that. I personally don't do well without some kind of an outline, so this was a good exercise for me to just paint more free-handed and loose today, but you need to do what feels right for you. I hope you're finding this tutorial fun and helpful. If you're enjoying my painting and teaching style, I hope you'll subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss out on any of my new and upcoming weekly tutorials. And at this point, I'll take a quick break and stop talking with my scratchy, sick voice, and let's just sit back and relax to some pretty music and enjoy the creative painting process. To paint in the look of buds here, I'm really just painting in one petal shape that is a little bit smaller in size, super simple, yet a beautiful adjustment that really creates interest in the piece. Isn't this pretty? I just love how this looks. They are so simple and delicate, yet also so beautiful. Now comes the tricky part though, and that is tying them all together by painting in the branch in the background. Now, as I said, I sort of had an idea in mind of how I wanted this to go, but really I'm playing a lot of this by ear, so we'll just see what happens. I'll just mix up a nice dark color for the branch using some burnt umber and maybe a touch of Payne's Gray to darken it up even more. Then I'll simply start painting in some stem lines where I think the branch may go to connect all of the blossoms together. I think I'm going to try just having one main stalk with some smaller stem lines branching off from it, but your painting may be different from mine, so you're going to have to be the judge on what your unique painting needs. Now, you may also notice that as I paint these, the branch lines are not going to be perfectly straight and smooth. I'm going to be adding some little bumps in here to make it look more realistic and also add some character. The biggest thing to keep in mind when adding in these branches is to make sure to follow through with your lines as you're going around the blossoms so that they all look connected and you don't have any floating pieces in there, of course, unless that's the look you're going for. Now that I have a better idea of how the composition is starting to come together, I can add in some things to finish it off and make it look more complete. It might even be fun, excuse me, to add some extra little squiggly branches in here, and I may even add a few extra buds on some of the ends of these. I really like how this looks. I had a huge internal debate with myself at this point because it looked good just as it was, but at the same time, I sort of felt like it needed something more in the bottom right-hand corner. So I took a huge risk here and decided to add in a few more blossoms on a separate branch. Now, the final detail we need to add to this piece before we can call it done is to add in the center stamen areas to more of the open flowers. This is where I'm going to switch over to the rigger brush to help ensure that my lines are nice and thin, but you can use the number 6 round for this if you want to. I'm just going to change up my color here a little bit really quickly too. I'm going to take some of the alizarin crimson and add that into this dark brown so that I get more of a dark reddish brown. Then I'll use that color and paint in some very thin lines into the centers of the open flowers. All right, then to really finish off the look of these, let's add in some small dots at the tops of those thin lines as well. And there we have it. Isn't this such a beautiful yet simple and lovely watercolor piece? This really wasn't hard and didn't take long to do, and it's the perfect painting exercise to try if you're short on time, or maybe if you're not feeling very well, or if you've had a tough week. I feel like this idea could even make some really pretty greeting cards or thank you cards as well. The options are limitless if you just use a little bit of creativity. I'm so glad you joined me today. I hope you had some fun and maybe even learned something new. If you did enjoy this tutorial, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel so I can continue to help you discover your artistic side.